Welcome to Central Valley Writers Workshop. Our Great Valley is home to many writers and authors, all of whom are looking for tips, tools, and techniques to improve their writing skills. We hope that you will learn all of this and more as we interview authors and experts on our show. I'm your host, Claudia Newcorn, author of the award-winning Chrysalis Chronicles of Fairy series, magazine editor, freelance writer, and Modesto Bee community columnist. Today we're going to be interviewing Rod Brouhard, author of Life's Little Emergencies, a handbook for active, independent seniors and their caregivers. Rod is an experienced paramedic in EMT and brings a lot of background and knowledge to this book that he has recently written. Rod, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Could you tell us a bit about your background and what motivated you to write this book?
I am a paramedic, and I've been a paramedic here in Modesto and Stanislaus County for 20 years. Not only have I taught, but I've been a teacher actually at MJC, and I was an advisor for the paramedic program at CSU Stanislaus. And I left that. I started writing, doing some freelance writing. I was a community columnist with you at the Modesto Bee. Still do that on occasion.
Yeah, I see your head pop up, and I know Rod's still around.
Every once in a while. I am also a magazine writer, and I write online actually for About.com. It's a New York Times website, and I cover all of their first aid and emergency preparedness content.
You've been a guide on About.com for quite a number of years, haven't you?
I've been a guide on About.com. Actually, in April of this year, it will be 6 years.
Really?
Yes.
So you're one of the earliest guides, because I remember when that site came up.
Yeah, I'm getting there now. I'm starting to be seen as one of the old guys around. So.
The old guides.
Yes, the old guides, exactly.
What inspired you to write a book? I mean, you're busy writing for About.com. As you say, you're an active freelance writer. So now you have to take aside time to write a book. What motivated you?
You're right. And I've always wanted to do a book. I was writing for About.com. I was doing pretty well. I decided to try to pitch a book idea. I didn't get any takers. Hired an agent. He worked with me very well, actually. He has sold several titles to the Dummies folks, the Wiley Publishing. And I thought, well, that's the place. First Aid for Dummies. I don't see one. I can't find one. It turns out they did sell a First Aid for Dummies, and it didn't do well.
Really?
And that was, it was several years ago, almost 15 years ago that they had that. So I pitched it around a few more places, no takers, decided to kind of sit on it for a while, and actually got an out-of-the-blue email from a newsletter subscriber. Part of the About.com model is that everybody has a newsletter, each guide has a newsletter. I've quite a following on my newsletter, and I had somebody email me back out of the blue, would you be interested in writing a book for us?
Really?
And it was a wonderful opportunity. The executive editor for Demos Health, which is my publisher, she and I spoke on the phone and really kind of brainstormed the idea and came up with Life's Little Emergencies. That we came up with the title, we came up with the concept, we came up with the readership. We were really looking for an audience that was a good size audience that we could sell to when we finally get this thing done, that still likes to buy books, and this was the perfect audience for us. These are the folks that we were writing to.
Well, when I was looking at the book, one of the things that struck me is while you're targeting it at active adults and their caregivers, I think it would also have a great appeal to the children because many of the active adults, their children are in their 40s and 50s and taking care of, assisting their parents, keeping an eye on them. So I think you would have a very broad target audience for this book.
That's something that I found as I was writing it. It's really hard to put it into a niche what really we were writing about, or I was writing about. Life's Little Emergencies is a sensical, easy to read approach on modern first aid. So the idea was to write a book that it's a first aid book for sure, but it's more than that. It talks about the logistics of calling 911. What's going to happen when you do? And 911 is included into the model, and that's really what I was trying to do. As I did that, I discovered, well, I've got to include some stuff about kids. If I'm writing a book for seniors, and that's going to be the first aid book that's sitting on their shelf, that book has to have something that they can apply to the grandkids when they're visiting.
Okay.
So in the section that, there's not a whole section for children, and should there be a sequel to this, maybe the Family Guide to Life's Little Emergencies or something along those lines, there will certainly be a chapter dedicated to children, but in this case I stuck with the worst case scenario, the thing we hope never happens. So choking for infants, choking for children, CPR for infants and for children are all covered in the book. And that is just, despite the fact that this is a book focused on seniors, the truth of the matter is folks have kids and they have grandkids. And
well, the grandkids are coming over.
Absolutely.
Exactly. What are some of the other highlights of the book that you address in going through the first aid process?
You know, I tried to write it so that it could be something that you would be willing to read or you would want to read from cover to cover. So the idea was to lighten it up a little bit. First aid books are two kinds of people write first aid books. Doctors that really aren't interested in it, and they look at it as an easy way to make a buck because they're just going to write, you know, I'm going to write first aid, but first aid doesn't really count, right? Or it's written by committee. That's the other group of people that write books about first aid. They write them, they're textbooks, and they read that way.
They're very dry. I have one
dry.
on my shelf. It's bone dry. You go to it in an emergency. You don't read it as a book.
And I wanted something that you would actually sit down and go, wow, this is interesting, and I want to learn more, and turn the page and continue going. So one of the things I did is I got rid of the stodginess. So I write from a lighthearted, humorous point of view, or try to inject a little humor. These are some serious topics, and when I first started writing first aid stuff for About.com, there was a belief kind of that you couldn't be funny and cover things that had to do with you know, the bad outcome could be death. So we don't want to be funny. We have to be serious.
Stodgy, as you said.
And no, we can be funny. We can have a good time. And took that approach. The approach has really done well for me. And with the book, it's the same kind of reaction that I've been getting from folks. So that's how it's written. It's written, number one, I got rid of all the medical terminology, or it's explained. But I try to use lay terminology as best I can. The idea is that I'm sitting next to you, and you and I are having this conversation, and I'm telling you these stories that are in the book, and I'm explaining situations in a way that makes sense, not unlike I did when I was teaching. And that was kind of what I drew from. I very much drew from my experiences as an educator. And so I wrote the book with kind of a little tongue-in-cheek sometimes. One reviewer described me as irreverent. Okay, I'll accept that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so, and that was the idea, and I've had really good luck. Everybody that has given me feedback on the book has found that once they get started, they want to keep going. And they read the entire thing cover to cover, and I've done my job.
Well, it's very interesting because how-to books have a tendency to be kind of turunk, 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 turunk. You're dealing, as you say, with at times life-threatening situations. How did you develop techniques, whether linguistically or the way you wrote your chapters, to pull people along? So as you said, they want to keep reading even though this is a first aid book.
I'm a storyteller at heart. So when I'm telling a story, I inject sound effects and, you know, different voices and everything. And I never tell a story that doesn't have an element of humor in it. And even when I'm telling a story about, you know, we are, as paramedics and EMTs, we're a war story kind of crowd. We come back to the station after a long shift, and we tell a story about what happened in our day. And some of them are pretty tragic, but they don't ever come out sounding that way to us. And we have a bit of gallows humor. I've even written about that for the Bee in the past.
I remember, I read your columns when they come out.
Thank you very much, and I read yours as well. and that gallows humor, that kind of black humor thing that we have going on, what I find is that people speaking to me, at first they're a little put off by the idea, but pretty soon they get kind of drawn into it. And you can tell these same stories outside of the ambulance station in a way that makes sense to the layperson, and they enjoy it. They have a great time with that concept. So I adopted the same thing. The book is filled with vignettes that are stuff that I've seen over the years in my career, odd little bits that I've learned in researching different things. There is a section in the book that talks about taking nitro and Viagra together.
Oh my.
I won't ruin it for you, but it's kind of funny. There's a section of the book that talks about a patient that I treated that had suffered a cardiac arrest on the way to the hospital, and he had started off by driving his grandson with him to go to the hospital and chose not to. There's no humor involved in that, but I did it as a way to illustrate the point I was making in that chapter, which is not to drive yourself in certain situations. So I kind of tried to alternate between a little bit of humor for the more lighthearted stuff, try to be serious, but still tell the story and draw the reader in and make it, I dare say, entertaining.
It sounds like you blended vignettes. You didn't just take what I'd call a lecture approach. I mean, as an instructor and teacher at MJC, you could have very easily adopted that. So you're engaging people, you're connecting with them on a very experiential level. And that's what I'm hearing as you're talking about, which helps them go, I can relate to that. I know people who've gone through these situations. When you were organizing your book, I mean, I'm sure that, what with 6 years of writing for About.com, you have got infinite topics that you could pull out. How did you go about deciding what is the content? How am I going to organize it? Did you do a plot? Did you do an outline?
I did an outline. Any proper book pitch comes with an outline. Some sample writing, an outline, a synopsis. And despite the fact that I sat down with Noreen over the phone and we hammered out the concept of the book, she had to pitch this to her editorial board in order to accept it and assign me the manuscript. So I had to sit down and write an outline and do a proper book proposal, just like you would normally do if I was submitting a proposal cold. So I did the outline. I used, as a matter of fact, an outline that was originally going to be the dummies outline. And I sat down and using that, that's when I decided to include humor. That sitting down and doing the outline, the titles of the book and the outline essentially became the table of contents.
Okay.
The titles and the kind of double entendres that are in there and the things that I was attempting to put and make it something that you might have a smile or maybe a giggle throughout the book about started really with that outline. And that set the tone. And then as I'm writing the samples for each chapter or the synopsis for each chapter, I kept that up and continued with that same kind of humor when appropriate.
Okay.
Or, if it's something you just could not make fun of, at least you could do it in a way that draws the reader in. You have to have that hook. It's just like magazine writing. You got to have that hook. You got to have that, I want to read the next sentence. I want to see what happens. And that was the same approach that I used in writing the full manuscript at the end. I did that approach in the outline, kept it going through the entire manuscript. And that's how I put everything together. Now, actually picking the outline, that was probably 95% hating what I was reading in other first aid books.
Okay, so you use those as a foil
I did,
in order
absolutely.
to create your outline. And we'll be back with Central Valley Writers Workshop after these messages.
Looking for an elegant restaurant with a personal touch? Open Tuesday through Sunday, Sips Bistro and Wine Shop offers daily specials from their lunch and dinner menus. Fine dining, fine wine, and personal service. Sips Bistro and Wine Shop is the perfect location. Zips Bistro and Wine Shop, 901 Carpenter Road, Suite 39, Modesto.
And we're back with Rod Brouhard. Now here you have all this technical information. You're explaining to people a lot of important issues. How did you go about editing and proofing it? Because it's not just something any editor can go through. They could chop out important phrases or words that could actually jeopardize a person's life. How did you go through that process?
We had some headbutting that went on a little bit. Demos Health is a wonderful company. It's the trade paperback, which just is publishing nomenclature for you and me. It's consumer driven. Demos Health is the consumer imprint of Demos Medical, which is a medical textbook company.
Okay.
And they write, or they publish, I should say, textbooks for medical schools across the country and that sort of thing. So this isn't a group that doesn't know their health care. This is a group that knows their health writing. They know what it is that we're trying to do. They're familiar with the terminology. I went out of my way not to use that terminology as much as I possibly could. But when doing the editing, great team at Demos Health, great team. So there were times when they would edit. I can tell you as a magazine writer and as a newspaper writer, my goal whenever I write a column for the Bee, especially, my goal was, you remember Joan Betancourt?
Yes.
Was the editor, the copy editor at the Bee when we started.
And she went through that with a machete.
She did, and my goal was to not let Joan cut anything out. So my goal was to write it so that the editor liked what she read and didn't want to change a thing. And I've taken that with me to internet writing is a little different. Often we get to publish our own stuff.
Yeah.
There is for the health channel, which is what I'm part of at about.com, we have an editorial team and we do get edited, and I love that. For the book, that experience really helped. So I wrote it, hopefully that the copy editors liked it. That means they're going to change less. What they do change tends to make me sound much better.
Okay.
So I like that. There were some things that we disagreed about, and when they send back the proofs and I get an opportunity to read the edited chapters, went through, read the whole thing, and then decided what things I didn't like about the edited chapters, and I would write notes back to them. And we would do it through Word files that just had changes tracked on the side, and we would mark it up back and forth, and it would be very much a give or take process.
It sounded very collaborative.
It did, and it was a collaborative process that took quite a while, as a matter of fact.
How long? I mean, from the point that you had, how long did it take you to write your manuscript, and then from the point you were completed, how long did it take to the manuscript actually was published? The
whole thing, start to finish, from signing contract to hitting the shelves, was 14 months.
That's actually fairly quick.
And I have heard that from some other of my author friends, but for me to actually write the manuscript was about 6 months. And nonfiction books are a little different, especially how-to books. You pitch the concept and you get the assignment, and then it's very much like magazine writing. You sit down and you write the article, or you write the book. You might write the manuscript after you get the assignment. Unlike a fiction book where you're going to write the entire thing and then try to sell the story as is and then edit what you have. So to actually knock the book out in 6 months for a first timer, I felt like quite an accomplishment.
It is, yes, you're right.
It was, however, a little bit of pulling out the hair, and I got it done. I probably could have done it faster, and I based that on the fact that as my deadline got closer, I wrote more. So I'm thinking if my deadline was set...
Pressure cooker?
Yes, absolutely. And that's how I work. If I don't have the deadline, I put it off till tomorrow. So.
Well, now, here you are, you're working with a team of people. What was the experience like? I mean, you're an author, you have your point of view as to what you're trying to create. the tone, the voice of your book, they've got a view of how we're going to get this out there. It'll appeal to people and it will sell. What was the collaborative process like beyond the proofing and editing? How did you work together to come up with a finished product you were both happy with?
You know, it is very collaborative. It is, and you know, it's interesting that you say you're both happy with, because there are times when I don't think they like my book at all. As we're going through this process, I get the feeling that, wow, they're slamming on this part or criticizing that part, or I just don't think they like it at all. And it wasn't until the process is over and I have an email somewhere from somebody, so one of the team members, and this is a process. I think I have emails between the PR person, the editors. I want to say there are 5 or 6 people that I have emailed back and forth with through the process. Somebody at some point said, "This is a beautiful book," and I thought, wow, so they do like it. And it was an off-the-cuff kind of secondary comment to what the email was about. It really didn't have anything to do with what we were talking about, but she just liked it, and I thought, okay, we're on the right track.
Okay, it was worth all the work.
It was worth all the work, yeah.
Did you ever, you mentioned headbanging, did you ever get into situations where you had to agree to disagree, or the publisher pulled publishers' rights and said, this is the way we're going to do it?
Never had anything like them pulling publishers' rights. They were wonderful, have been wonderful to work with. I think that there were some places where I finally said, this isn't really what I envisioned, this isn't really what I wanted, but pick your battles. And that's where I think in this case I had to find some things that even now as I read them, I know what they are that have been changed, or titles have been changed or whatever, that I think, this isn't really what I wanted, but it doesn't change the overall product.
Okay.
Maybe it makes it better, and I can't see it through my own point of view, but maybe at the end they were right. I don't know. I only know that there were times when I stood my ground and said, well, this is the hill I'm going to die on, and then there are times when I said, you know what, just, okay.
What the heck, let it go.
Heck, let's do it.
Again, but it reflects the collaborative process you were working on. Because of what you're dealing with is so fact-based, did you have to do research or data gathering in order to support any statements you made, keep your sources, be able to provide references, and how did you go about doing that?
I did. Each chapter has references in the back of the book. In the notes section are the references for the chapters as necessary. Some of the things that I talk about in there are just straight up medical tenets. There really isn't anything to support. There are some things that we do particularly in first aid, we don't really have any evidence to support. It's just that's what we do, because that's what we've always done. And one of the things I wanted to do was to get rid of some of the myths, utilize as much as I could from the research that was out there. And so that's what I did. I used as much evidence-based medicine as I could. It's something that I do on about.com, so I wanted to do it for Life's Little Emergencies. So where I could put that in there, I did. And about.com, everything that we write on the health channel anyhow, that we put out there is medically reviewed.
Okay.
So I have a team of docs that are reading my stuff, and that's very much a collaborative effort as well. And so if I have already had it medically reviewed through about.com, I felt very comfortable using that same information when I wrote in Life's Little Emergencies.
Well, it sounds like, I think you're in a very good position there, because people can pick up the book and have a confidence in it that it's not just, yes, you have 20 years of experience, but it's not just your point of view. You've really researched and built the infrastructure for this how-to book that works very well. One of the things I love to ask authors is, we all have to find time to write. When do you set aside the time to do your writing, and do you do anything special to create an environment that encourages you to sit down and handwrite or type, whichever way you go?
I'm a typer. If I had to handwrite, if I lived in the days before typewriters, I would not be a writer.
Jack London? No, okay.
Nope. Yes. So I am only a type guy, and I am a edit as I go guy. So I'm one of those people that when I am done writing it, it needs to be ready. And
Okay.
I will go back and reread it later, and guaranteed if I go back and reread it later, I will change it. I am also one of those people that I edit ruthlessly.
Good.
If there is a way that I can draw blood from my manuscript, I do that. I chop it down as much as I possibly can. I believe that adverbs in general are the enemy, and so that's my rule.
When do you usually write? In the mornings?
I'm
evenings?
a write when I can guy. If I need that quiet, and a lot of times I need the solitude, then I'm a late night guy. So I will wait until everybody else in the house has gone to bed, and I'll stay up and write until 2 or 3 in the morning. If I'm pushing those deadlines, then the other way I can get solitude, seems a little weird, is to get as much white noise as possible. So a big portion of this book was actually written in the bar at the lodge at Mount Reba, Bear Valley.
Really?
While I took my son up there for a ski trip, and I sat and wrote for 8 straight hours that day and knocked out a big portion of
Wow.
it. The deadline looming helped quite a bit with the pressure.
And the environment fostered creativity.
The environment did foster creativity, and actually, sitting there and I would just have a beer on the table and write. And there were talking and things and stuff going around me, and I was able to tune all that out. That helps me, or I need it to be really quiet. Either one.
Now, as both a freelance writer and an author, are there tips, advice, or suggestions you'd like to share with our audience that they can learn from you to improve their own writing and help them pursue whether it's writing a how-to book or some other form of writing?
I think that probably the best thing that I've ever learned to do was to just, what I mentioned earlier, cut it down to the bare essentials. If you want to dress it up a little bit after that, that's fine, but it really needs to be down to the bare bones, and say what you need to say in, in one word or less if you can, right?
One word or less, I like that.
I
Okay.
like when you write for the newspaper, you have your column inch is golden. So, you have your 500 words for your column, and you better make it happen in 500 words. And if there's a lot you need to say, then you need to figure out a way to say it in 500 words. That's different than college.
Yes.
Your professor in college wants you to just fill it full of flowery speech and lots of big words and
Fill 20 pages
fill
with whatever.
with whatever, exactly. And I'm the guy who went back to school and finished my degree after working as a paramedic for years and years and years. And I was already writing for the Bee before I finished my degree, and I thought, wow, I get paid to write, and still these professors can't stand it. And it wasn't until I went back in and filled it with fluff that I started getting the better grades.
No. Here, have a machete, run away with it.
Absolutely.
Well, before we wrap up today, I would very much like to invite you to pull the pineapple. This is a tradition we've developed with our guest authors and writers where we invite you to pull a pineapple, literally, of course it's the bookend, and add your book to our collection of guests on the show. Because I know our listeners have really enjoyed all the advice and experience you've been sharing with them as an author, as a writer, and also in telling them about the book. So please, pull our pineapple.
Thank you. Here we go. I will add it to the library.
And you stand out nice there. You're nice bright pink. And with that, I would like to thank our viewers today for joining us on Central Valley Writers Workshop. Today we've had Rod Brouhard, author of Life's Little Emergencies, a handbook for active independent seniors and caregivers, and it's a wonderfully unique first aid book that people can use and read from cover to cover. I'd like to thank Rod for being with us today, sharing his expertise and experience, and we look forward to seeing you all again on the next Central Valley Writers Workshop. Have a wonderful day.